Hello, my name is Mark Greene, Mission Champion at the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity. And this is the TGIM, Thank God It's Monday podcast, where we explore the wonderful ways in which Jesus works through his people in a whole variety of jobs and sectors. Today, we're looking at education, and the lessons in life and work are coming from Hannah Baldry, over three glorious years into her career as a primary school teacher, and from Kim Hall, also been a primary school teacher, been a head teacher, been one of His Majesty's inspectors of schools, and is now a consultant working with senior leadership teams in education. Well, shalom and welcome to you both. Thanks so much for coming in after your very first dance lesson today.
Yes.
As ever, in the TGIM podcast, you, the guests, get to squawk at each other, talk to each other, ask questions if you like. But I'm putting my hand up first, if I may. So, Miss Baldry, 3 years into teaching in an inner city primary school.
Yeah.
Still beaming. And what drew you into teaching?
It's a good question. I think at first it wasn't really something that I had considered doing, really. I'm not really sure why, because now I look back and I think it really fits my skill set and the things that I enjoy. I think sometimes it can just get a bit of a bad reputation. It's the kind of thing that you go into once you've done what you would actually like to do as your career.
Or you failed to do.
Or you failed to do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely. And if you can't be a secondary school teacher, then you become a primary school teacher, which actually just isn't true. I think there's a massive community of really passionate primary school and secondary school teachers who choose to go into the profession because they want to. But I think that wasn't me to begin with. And then just gradually over time, I think I kind of found myself in places of experience where I was experiencing working with children and really enjoying that. Various even kind of kids camps, Sunday school teams and that kind of thing. So eventually started to think that maybe that was an option for me career-wise. But really, I think my passion kind of began when I was at Live Village, which is a charity in South Africa that support orphaned and vulnerable children. And I was there for 6 months when I was 18, and I did 3 months kind of work experience in the school, which was chaotic at points, having had no experience and just launching in. But I just really loved it. I really loved it. I was working with really vulnerable children from the local townships, most of whom lived on the village or were children of staff that were there. And I just had a really fantastic time. I worked with a great teacher there, and it was really tough, but I think almost seeing the most extreme side of the profession was really exciting. I kind of saw, I guess, the adventurous side of it, where you really don't know what you're doing, where you're really thrown in and you just have to kind of work it out. But also learnt from some really passionate, some really driven people who knew that they were there because God had called them to be there, and they were choosing the harder path. And I worked with one child in particular who really struggled with his behaviour. And so supporting him, I just found I really loved it. I really loved the chaos. Weirdly, I loved the chaos. I loved just getting alongside a child and just seeing them change. And yes, there were very difficult days, but there were also really joyful days. And I just really enjoyed it. And so I already had a place at university, which I'd deferred. So that kind of affirmed my choice, which was great. So that was really where it started. And then I did 3 years at the University of Gloucestershire, and I did the straight teaching degree, and did various different placements and year groups. And that's kind of...
You're in Gloucester.
Yes.
Often teachers just go local, don't they?
Yes, they do. A lot of people just kind of then teach where they did their training, or they go back to where they grew up and they teach there. But I really felt God call me to London. It was COVID lockdown number 1 when I was applying for my first job, just to add another level of chaos to an already quite chaotic process.
But you like that?
Of interviews. Well, Sometimes, yeah. So it was difficult, but I knew that God just wanted me in London. I couldn't really explain it. You know, when you just feel the pull of the Holy Spirit to a place and it just feels appealing and exciting, and you kind of know that that's where you're meant to be. So kind of blindly followed in obedience. And I mean, it's not an unusual thing to move to London after university, but I think for a teacher, they might want a few years experience elsewhere before they try an inner city primary school. But I landed a job as an NQT, which it was then, and started. I mean, they employed me and they'd never seen me teach a lesson because I had a Zoom interview. So it was a risk for them and it was a risk for me.
Screen test, you got to go on Hollywood.
Good screen, yeah. So, yeah, it was a challenge, but I love it. And thankfully, love my school. And it is very different to where I trained. But God knew, and he knew that I would really enjoy it.
So just tell me a little bit about that school. I mean, you've said inner city, but there's lots of different kinds of inner cities, isn't there?
There are, very much so. So I teach just off the Edgware Road, kind of in between two quite large council estates. Right. And there are, I think, about 42 languages spoken in my primary school across 7 classes, from nursery all the way up to year 6. Which presents a challenge as well, having not had much experience teaching children who were English as an additional language. But it was a good challenge. I think very different to what I was used to, but wonderful.
Before I come to Kim, let me just ask you one more question about this.
Yeah.
So you've chosen to go to a school full of vulnerable, marginalised children, many of whom are not speaking English at home, I assume.
Yes.
And so on. And you've got chaos there and all of those sort of things that I probably can't fully imagine. Why are you choosing? What's making you choose that?
It's a good question. I mean, in every school across the country, there are vulnerable families, vulnerable children. But I think I really felt the pull to work with children of different cultures, of different nationalities. There are a huge number of asylum seekers and refugees at my primary school. And I just really felt called to kind of jump in to what that would look like. I think in the future, I would love to work with children who really struggle with their behaviour. And thankfully, the children at my school behave really well. But there is that very difficult element of there's a lot of vulnerable families, there's a lot of low-income families, people who have just moved to the UK, who don't know the culture, who don't know English, and they're really thrown into an alien environment. And I think Jesus did a lot of meeting people in quite alien environments, and he specialised in getting alongside families, individuals, children, people who are different to him, who are marginalised. And I really felt that was something that I wanted to do as well. I wanted to mirror that in my work. And I think I do have, and have always had, a heart for justice. But just the way that Jesus just offers such safety, and he can offer, even if everything else falls away, if you have kind of no money, you have no academic prospects, if there's nothing else that you feel like you can offer the world, Jesus gets alongside you and he supports the broken. And just to do that with teaching is just something I wanted to do. And I also just feel like education is a huge vehicle for change. It's kind of statistically proven that it's the one thing that can lift people out of poverty, especially, you kind of look at Afghanistan and what's going on there with the Taliban and girls in education. And that was the one thing that really transformed that nation. And it's devastating that it's just been taken away from them. But statistically, if you can read and you can write, that really lifts you out of poverty. So there's also, a practical element, I think, to the heart that I have behind it too.
Yeah.
And I think Jesus did that as well. He fed people and he clothed people. and he gave them somewhere to stay, and he put them in a community. And I think that there is such power to do that as well.
Well, I think the Department of Education will thank you for that propaganda message. That's marvellous, marvellous. Kim,
Yes.
different story, but
very similar. And I have to say, already, I would love to be a child in your class. That would be absolutely...
Sometimes, not all the time.
Maybe a bit late for that, Kim.
So that can happen.
So tell us about how you got into all of this.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm a lot older and have been... and how long have you got, I suppose, is the answer. But for me, I was somebody who came from a background that was disadvantaged, and actually I realised when I became a teacher that I was somebody who would have been on the child protection register, and I would have been actually one of these vulnerable people and vulnerable pupils. But actually what I experienced in school was exactly what you talked about, that safety, the safety of being in school. A teacher who taught me to read. And because I didn't get that at home at all. So the fact I learned to read opened up, exactly as you said, opened up for me a completely different experience and opened my eyes to what else could be. And that I wasn't defined by the place that I'd been born into. And so I was one of these people who played with my dolls to get them to, I wanted them to sing. They didn't quite do as I expected them to. And really felt very early on that I had a call, and it was a call to be a teacher, because of what I had experienced. But that wasn't to be. God knows why. And knows exactly the number of times that I'd had places to train to become a teacher and wasn't able to take them up. And I obviously wasn't ready at that time to become a teacher. And it wasn't until I went into retail and retail management and also in training and development. So I kind of was teaching, and there were lots of things that I was thinking, actually, this is all fine. And then it was actually in my 30s where I retrained, and we decided as a family that, yes, I would train, I would go back to university, I would start exactly as you did, 4 years of training to be able to then become a teacher. And that's what I did. I went to Cambridge. There was a great programme called Fast Track, which meant that my leadership experience wasn't going to be wasted. And I had a real sense of God saying, I will restore the years that the locusts have eaten. And so I then went into teaching, and with all the same kind of views that everything was going to be fabulous. And my first job was in a very difficult area with children who, again, not so much language, but actually had low aspiration. Families had low aspiration, lots of vulnerability. And I said, I'll teach any year group apart from year 6. So I got given year 6. And this year 6 came with a huge reputation. They'd had such a poor experience. Nobody wanted to teach them. My first day, they were all sat outside the head teacher's office. Adults were unkind to them. They had had a very, very difficult experience. And I remember praying about, what can I do for these children who are at the very last year before they go off to secondary school. And it was there that I coined the phrase, which then went through all my career: I only teach the best. So I said to the children, I've come into teaching because I only teach the best, and so therefore you must be the best because I only teach the best. And they were kind of, actually, this woman's a bit mad, really, isn't she? She hasn't got a clue what we're like. And we learned together how to develop a class that where people are safe, where you can learn, where you can be you, but actually we learn how to be together as well as people. And I learned the fact that teachers are leaders of their classroom, and they are leaders of learning, and that difference that you make actually comes from not just the subjects that you teach, but actually the way in which you care and the way in which you want to build your own craft for as a teacher, and that you build up mutual respect with children and young people that actually is just amazing to have.
Let me ask you a question just about the word best.
Yes.
I mean, because, it can mean a lot of things, can't it? Clearly not best in the sense of, competing with, Winchester College with classes of 12 kids and, not best in that sense.
No.
So how are you defining best in that context for them and in sense for yourself? And obviously for their guardians or parents and carers?
So in terms of having a kind of line of saying, I only teach the best, what you then had to do is really unpack with them what that would look like. So what does best mean? And having those times where right at the very start, you're negotiating. As a teacher, you negotiate all day long with children.
Yes,
don't you?
Absolutely.
You're negotiating and working out, I'll have this, you have that. And
gosh, I thought it was command and control.
No, it's a lot of a lot of skills of negotiation, and coming up with them. What does best look like? So, what does best look like from me to them, and what does best look like from you to me, and how will we do that?
So, what does it look like?
What does it look like? Well, what it looked like was we worked out that actually it was about being honest. It was about encouraging. It was about being kind and caring to each other and lifting each other up. It was about achievement. It was about responsibility and my responsibility within the environment. And it was about trust and trustworthiness and being trusted with what you said and being trusted to do the things that you said you were going to do. And I really learned that class, at the end of the year, every single young person cried when they left, and they achieved great things in the year, because it wasn't that they couldn't achieve. They hadn't had the environment in which they could thrive. And that's what it was about. And I have so many stories. And last year, interestingly, in a time when I was thinking about retiring and all those things, I met in one of those kind of God instances. I met two pupils from that class who recognised me straight away, and who are now in their 30s and have their own children, and could talk to me about actually the difference that year had made to them. And I couldn't have known that at the time. I was hanging on by my fingernails sometimes in the first year of teaching with this class of 30 that were all over the place, and in that lovely chaos that you mentioned, Hannah. But actually, God knew differently. And if it had been up to me, I wouldn't have taught them, because I didn't want to teach Year 6. So thank goodness it wasn't.
And did that change you then?
Yes, it did. It changed me. It helped me understand the seasons that are in teaching, and the difference of the different half terms and how they work, and how the rhythm of the school year. It really helped me understand that. It helped me understand to have a vision for the children in my class that was really important for me to have. And as a Christian, it helped me to rely on God to provide insight sometimes. I had a child whose father had died, and it was really sad and really difficult. But actually knowing her and how you responded at different times was a real learning for me. So that it didn't embarrass her either, because that wouldn't have been what she wanted. And so it's all understanding all of those things came from that class. And they would say, Mrs. Hall's walked over to the window. We've done something. Oh. I didn't even have to say anything. That whole class, we worked as a...
You go to the window.
You just go to the window. Exactly, it was. Mrs. Hall has gone to the window. Don't come back. So they were, and they taught me about the main things that I then carried through into being a head teacher, and then also into my life beyond in terms of education. So, they were a really pivotal class for me. And
the thing you didn't want turned out to be...
That's right.
The best
gift of all. It was, yeah.
Similar heart, but, I think you can probably sense that, don't you? Both putting yourselves in, actually, relatively speaking, difficult situations, both having an experience quite young of something, live and so on.
Yeah.
Just tell me, because something I know is that you basically, when you became a head, you pretty much chose to go to schools in special measure.
Yeah.
So can I ask you the question that I sort of asked Hannah in a different context?
Why? Because those children, the children deserve to have the quality, and they deserve to have education that helps make a difference for them. And actually, you talked, Hannah, and it really resonated with me about the fact that actually the biggest gift we give to children who are disadvantaged is the ability to read. And actually, that was an absolute driver for me in terms of children will not leave my watch not being able to read. And so in schools that are often failing schools, that's the one area that you look at and you see that children aren't learning to read, and they're not being taught to read well, and they're not getting a love and an enjoyment of the written word and all that will give them. And they're quite sad places to go to, but they are places where actually God just gave me a heart for the children in this place, and I thought I can be an advocate. That's my job. I can bring the skills that I've developed. I can bring all of those things into this place and make a difference for children. And that's why I went, and to work with children who would say to me, "But no one wants to be with us."
Yeah. Well, can I come back a little while to leadership?
Yeah.
Because you know a bit about that.
I do. little, only a little.
Well, no star, I think, in leadership,
No.
do you? Hannah, early years in the teaching, obviously you've got kids, and obviously you've got colleagues, but you've also got parents.
Yes.
I wonder if you'd like to say to me how, this particular, I mean, obviously I am one, and I know that I was probably difficult at times. But I'm sure parents in general are an issue, but I'm just interested also, not just in the general things, but also here you are in a multicultural school and with parents from quite different social and religious backgrounds.
Yes, completely.
So
yes, it is hard. Gosh, I don't know if I've got 10, maybe 3.
Negotiate. We're negotiating.
Hard. Yes, negotiating, bribery, all of those really good, useful skills. Parents are difficult sometimes. And I think the sometimes is key, because I think you do have wonderful relationships with parents as well. And you can develop a really lovely relationship with a family when you've taught multiple siblings and you get to know the parents really well. And I think kind of whatever family situation you've got, parents, carers, grandparents, they all need to be encouraged that they are raising their children in a really difficult world. And there are many challenges of any carer for bringing up children. And so I think the one thing I always try to do is be encouraging, even if their child is very difficult in the classroom or is causing problems or whatever it might be. Actually just always labelling, you're doing really well, you're doing a really good job. And I think, obviously, I'm young, I'm not a parent yet. And so there is also sometimes that disconnect of actually, I really don't know what it's like to have a job and a family. And And also sometimes labeling that can be helpful as well, that you admit in the places that you don't understand. But yes, generally it can be very difficult when there's cultural divides, cultural boundaries. I think there's a big spectrum. I've had everything from parents not engaging with me because I'm a young female, and they kind of don't think I have any idea what I'm talking about, or I'm not very good at maths because I'm a girl. I have had that one before.
Aren't you head of maths now?
Yes.
I'm head of maths.
Yes, I'm maths now. Yes, which is kind of ironic. But then I've also had really wonderful relationships with parents where I feel like communication's been really clear. Generally, it gets difficult where there's miscommunication. And obviously, there being such a language barrier at my school, it is hard. We do have translators and lots of staff that come and translate for us too, which is helpful. Or the children translate sometimes as well, which at Parents' Evening is always interesting. Sometimes you look at them and you think, I know that you haven't said exactly what I said to your dad. I can tell.
Your father seems to be smiling a lot. What did you say?
You've said exactly what I just told you. So yeah, parents, it's always an ongoing battle, but it's like any relationship, really. Relationships with children, relationships with colleagues, you handle it professionally and you show them the love of God. And I try to be clear always. I try to be honest always. But generally, once they get to know you, you can get on pretty well with them. Like any relationship, it goes through ups and downs.
So the first few years, it's from the outside, I've had teacher friends, the first year is...
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
But there's a lot of pressure all the way through. You're learning lots of things. There's things coming to you. You've got, 30 kids.
Yeah.
6 hours a day, 5 days a week. 8
Yes.
months a year. It's quite. So what sustained you through that? In whatever way, maybe, Mars bars or maybe spiritual disciplines.
Coffee, chocolate, all of that. It's a good question. I think the thing I find hardest is the daily grind. And what you were saying, Kim, about having vision. I think when you're first immersed in the school environment and you really are learning on your feet, and I used to always imagine it as swimming in a really big ocean and the waves are just kind of here all the time. And you kind of are semi-swimming, semi-drowning. That is kind of what your first year feels like constantly. And it doesn't really ease, because once you've ticked one thing off the to-do list, there's another thing to learn. And you're very much learning to teach alongside everything else, how to be professional, how to have working relationships. And I know that is the same in a lot of jobs. I mean, you think about the NHS and how people are just really thrown in the deep end. But it is a challenge. And learning to have vision and to have God's vision for your class is very difficult in the first year. But you do just gradually learn, and you do just gradually, you talked about the journey that you go on with your class. You do learn the different seasons of teaching. I mean, the run up to Christmas is normally absolute carnage. And really full on. And the same as the run up to the end of term. It's endless to-do lists and endless reports to write and endless meetings. But you do learn and you do grow, and there is a way of learning to have grace for yourself. And it kind of does get easier. When I first started, I remember my auntie, who was a teacher, said to me, it's really useless advice, but it just does get easier. And it does in time. But I definitely felt really burnt out in the first year and really had to rely on my friendships with other people, on my family, to really encourage me through. I remember my housemates used to make me dinner all the time because I just came home exhausted. Report writing season, the first time round, was horrendous, and they really just pulled me through. So you do have to have really good relationships and people around you. I think it's very difficult to not let that affect your faith and to not bring in that kind of measurement culture into your relationship with God? And how do you rest really well? How do you have a Sabbath when you've got 90 books to mark at the weekend and homework to prepare? And it does really test you. And I think...
So like salvation by works, is it?
Yeah, I think teaching can kind of lend itself to you feeling a bit like you have to earn your way, because it is all about how much progress can you get these children to make? How much more do we need to be doing? How are we measuring that? And in some ways, like, yes, there definitely does need to be ways that we measure academic success, but also it's very difficult when you are kind of solely responsible for that, like day to day, when that is your one job, because it's never finished. And, you know, often I would kind of go straight from the classroom, maybe into a church worship event, and to undo that almost like overstimulation of the teaching day, and to undo that, okay, I'm now not earning my way. God loves me regardless of what I can bring for him, regardless of what I can offer, regardless of what I can bring. To not bring the difficulties of the teaching day into your rest and into your relationship with God is really, really difficult. And I think I found gradually now over the years that actually I really do need to retreat to the secret place. I try to do it every morning. That does not always happen, especially on a Thursday and a Friday. But I really do need that time with Jesus in the morning. And I need to actually not pray for any of the children, not pray for any of my relationships at work, just be me and Jesus and just be intimate with him. And I'm sure that there will be many different seasons of that. There have been seasons when I've really interceded for my class and I've really prayed for specific things going on. But generally, I just need that half an hour in the presence of God in the morning. And I've had to really learn what it looks like to cultivate that. And I'm still not there, as we all are with our own personal, intimate relationships with God. But I've really found there to just be fruit in just remaining in him in that place in the morning. And then even if by 9:10, when I've done the register, I've lost all patience with the children, somebody's already had an argument or whatever it is, I can still remember that I was in that place in the morning. And so therefore Jesus is with me in the classroom. I might not feel it. I might be completely acting out of obedience. I might have forgotten all of the fruits of the Spirit, but I was in that place. And so therefore he must be with me now, and I must be bringing him in with me into this environment. And it is difficult also to teach children and to be with families of different faiths. It is sometimes you do come against stuff. Generally, I found it to be a really wonderful and positive experience, but it can be really hard. And so, and I mean, again, it's the same in any job. If you're working in a prison or you're working in the NHS, it is so challenging working with different people. But the Holy Spirit is what can soften those relationships. He's the one that can give you insight. He's the one that can, give you prophetic words if you need them, and to see children and families with the eyes of the Lord. And again, that doesn't always happen, but he is there and he's available to us. So that has really been what's got me through the daily grind.
Amen. Okay, so Tim,
Him.
any comments on that? I mean, anything to,
Do you know what? One of the things that happens in teaching is that teachers invariably, I think, go to the bits that they haven't done rather than the bits, the parts of their day that actually work really well. And one of the things I used to do as a head teacher was make my teachers, when we met together or I had any conversation with them, and say, what are the two things that work well today? What's the one thing you're going to do differently tomorrow? And I want you to go home with the two things that work well. And because the job, we all have 24 hours a day. No one has any more or any, or less. And actually, the job of a teacher, could spend 24 hours actually trying to fulfill what you think you need to do.
Yeah,
but actually it's knowing when enough, this is enough, I have done enough. And it's not about the more I strive, but it's about the more I think of what the children need rather than me striving, I think is a way that I've seen experienced teachers continue to refresh as they go through their career. And it's a really important lesson for us, for teachers really to have that it's okay. I chose for myself, I didn't work on a Friday night and I never worked on a Saturday. So it was, those are times that I have off, and then I start again Sunday afternoon, the usual Sunday afternoon. As a head teacher, it never stopped. Yeah. It continued. But equally, I think in jobs where you are looking at how you make a difference to the next generation of people and how you educate those and how you become skilled in your craft to be able to educate. And I look to the Bible and keep thinking the number of references to being a teacher and actually the calling that brings just shows it's really high on God's agenda to be a teacher. And so therefore it probably is hard work.
So there's a bit of wisdom for early career teachers. Is that the right language nowadays?
Yes, early career teachers, it is.
ECTs. Let's turn to your sort of career as a head and going into school, going to schools, instilling trying to shift a culture. I would like to say something about that, and how you went about shifting cultures.
Yeah, it's so special measures schools. That is what you are trying to do, trying to move that culture and instill a culture. So it's very clear as a head teacher going in. I'll talk to you about an example of one of the schools that I was head of. The children really felt they were the lowest in the school, and the school was very much about adults. So and the behaviour was poor. I think if Ofsted had grade 6s for things, that's actually what the school would have got.
Sorry. Is it grade 5 the worst that you can do?
4 is the worst you can get. 4 is the worst. So grade 6 is, it really was. It was a very grim place, and I hadn't even wanted to go there. It was a bit of a Nineveh experience, and God again putting me there as opposed to me wanting to go there. I thought I don't want to go there at all, and then lo and behold, I was there.
Even though you like going to bad places.
Even though I like going to bad places, this was not a place. This was very, very difficult.
Oh, right.
But the school had the longest corridor. It had been one part of the building had been built as a World War II hospital. Or it was going to be a World War II hospital. Wow. And then it never opened. It opened as a school. So it had the longest corridor. And the boys, and it was boys, unfortunately, would run down the corridor and then do a great big slide at the end, which was, that was the thing that they would do. And nobody stopped them. No one brought them back in any way, kindly, softly, or whatever. And so, again, I decided that I needed to do something to sort this part of behaviour, which was really quite taxing. And so the first half term, I had red carpet put in through the whole school and through the corridors. And the children came back to school, and I asked them if they'd noticed that if anything had changed. And they said, there was red carpet. And I said, yeah, there is red carpet. And why would I want red carpet? And they talked about important visitors that came to the school. They talked about the staff. They talked about the fact that I was important, which I agreed with. It was very important. And they talked about, it took a long time. This was a school of, I think, 480 children. And one little one said, is it because of us? and slowly having to talk with them and explain to them about how special they were. And therefore, because they were special, they could have red carpet. And then we looked at actually what happens on red carpet and how people are and what they do and how they walk and how they do on red carpet with their heads high and, and overnight it changed.
Wow.
From children running around the school to walking proudly around the school with their heads held high. There were other things where I also had to change the language that staff used with children and to have them to, in every case, say, you acknowledge a child. And in every case, you say, thank you for walking. You don't say, don't walk, or don't run, stop running. You say, thank you for walking, thank you for walking. And just those small things, and they were often very small, made such a big difference to the culture of the school. And when new families would come, I'd hear the children talk to them about the red carpet, and we walk on the red carpet and we hold our heads up high on the red carpet. This is how we are, because we're very special, And it really made, and there were many stories like that, but that one made its way to the DFE as well, because it changed behaviour instantly. And was it anything I did? It wasn't. Again, there were lots of God moments where actually there was a touch of God to make that change as well. So,
but it's creativity in line with a value.
Yeah,
it's not just red carpets. I mean,
no, it's not.
They were the best.
They were the best. Exactly, they were the best, and they knew they were the best.
And that's one of the ways that you showed them, help them to see that they were the best.
Yeah.
So it's. I think it's interesting, isn't it, when love is often very creative.
Yes, it is. It is, and very thinking about what they need. And you talk about measurement. I think as a head teacher, you have the responsibility for all of those things. I've been there in those schools where the results are not where they need to be, and we're having to do an awful lot of work. But actually, how you put that stress, how you explain that, how you equip your teachers is actually very important in terms of then getting that measurement to be in its right place. Because actually, if we get all these things right, the measurement will look after itself, and that's what we need to make sure we're doing.
You two obviously know all about what a head teacher has to do, but actually, could you give me a sense of
what a head teacher does?
Well, the complexity of it. Yes.
Because what don't they do?
Do you know, being a head teacher is again one of the biggest privileges, I think. Apart from being one of His Majesty's inspector, actually, it's a real privilege to be a head and to actually organise a school, to galvanise people, to train and develop staff to be able to be really good practitioners, really good, we're going to, again, if you teach the best, your teachers have to be the best. And being very much involved in that. The head teachers also have to know all about finance, buildings, HR, they have to be all kinds of things. And I learned, for me, having been in retail, actually, all of that I'd learned there was really very useful.
Luckily, the locusts may have devoured those years, but they left something for you.
They did. And so that was a really good, to be able to do those practical things that a head teacher has to make sure are in place. Schools that are in special measures, you have to make a lot of decisions that aren't very pleasant and easy for people, and learning how to bring people along with you, also how to find the teachers that have got the potential and the joy of teaching to actually take that and to nurture it and to give them a voice was really important as well as a head. I think apparently you're a swan. I've never quite understood being a swan. I don't think I was ever a swan, but I get the analogy of you when you left your office or you went out, you
walked slowly along the red carpet.
did. You walked slowly along the red carpet. You did, and you made sure you knew every child. You knew all about them. You could ask them something about each and every person.
So complex job. I mean, I'd asked Hannah a little bit about the pressure and how she's handled it.
Yes.
We're all different. How did you?
How did I do?
How did you do that?
Well, I had a number of things actually over the time. In one of the schools, I had a prayer team from the church that would come, and they would walk round the school praying round the outside, like the walls of Jericho, around the outside, which was.
And the school fell down.
And the school fell down. No, not at all.
That has happened recently.
No, and that was really, really important and helped in those times I couldn't pray. Exactly as you're saying, when sometimes things are so difficult, actually, I didn't always have the words to know how to pray. I would, at the beginning of term, before everybody came, I would walk round the school and just breathe the breath of God into the school.
Wow.
That was something I did, and make sure that actually that's what I was doing each time. I went on the executive toolbox.
This is the London Institute of Contemporary Christianity. This is outstanding executive program.
Executive program.
Totally outstanding.
And I actually asked the governors at the time for that to be part of my performance management and my development, and that the school paid for it because that was part of the development.
And all along, I thought you'd made a huge personal sacrifice.
No, and so again, that was a way in which to talk about kind of leadership development and my development and the importance for me for it to be in a Christian context, and that was very important for me.
Well, it's not just a witness thing; it's a personal determination to grow.
It is absolutely, and then Christian coaching, actually making sure I had a coach as well along the way to be able to have those times where, as a head teacher, when it's quite a lonely position and you can't explain to people some of the things that are going on because that's not appropriate, actually to have somebody that you could be yourself and just say, and this I'm really struggling with and I need to work it through, and them helping you to do that was, again, absolutely important. And I do have one person that I need to kind of, that I remembered, because I talked about, as an early teacher. In my first school that I was head, a chair of governors, a very wise man who had called Robert, who has years of experience in education, came to each week to meet me. 18 years later, I still meet him. I meet him 2 or 3 times a year. We have lunch together, and he helps me to keep sharp, to think carefully, to be challenged when I need to be challenged, and actually to keep soft and to keep that heart for children as well. And he's a man now in his 80s, and he still takes time to meet with me.
That's brilliant. Hope for us all.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Got a few years to go, just in case anybody's wondering. In terms of just, here's a teacher.
I know.
Right? How did you look after your teachers?
Oh, how did I look after my teachers? Well, on a Friday, and because you're absolutely right, Hannah, you mentioned earlier about Thursdays being the bit of a day. On a Friday, I would, at the end of school, would walk around the school and go and see as many teachers as I could in their classrooms. You could come and see me, but I would go and I would take with me chocolates and tissues. And it was about, okay, what's your week been like? What do I need to know? Is it a chocolate week or is it a tissue week? And let's talk about what's been going on in your week and what I need to do to respond to that. Being in a supportive environment where leadership looks very different in teaching is really crucial for you to continue being the the teacher that God has obviously made you into being. And that was a very important thing for me. And it was important that the teachers didn't feel they had to come to me. They did, but it wasn't about you come and find me. I will come and find you. I will come and walk along.
I will run down the road towards you.
Run down the road towards you, and I will walk alongside with you. And at those points, it was really important to have those conversations with people. They made such a difference.
Yeah, I
they
can
really
imagine.
did.
I can so imagine. Yeah.
And again, they were the small things that made the biggest change. And actually what you saw was staff who continued to be motivated, who wanted to then, who dug deep at times because they had to. In special measure schools, they're not easy places for teachers to work in. They dug, and actually, but the joy of seeing other professionals grow and develop was just amazing. And I still, one of my biggest senses of joy is the fact that those teachers that worked through those schools with me and those leaders are still in education.
Wow.
And they're still there, still making a difference.
So, Hannah, let me ask you a question. 3 years into teaching, lots of people leave teaching.
They do.
They do.
Huge numbers. They stick it out for 3 to 5 years. And they leave. Lots of people in your generation. And there's lots of reasons for it, isn't there? I just wonder if you were giving anybody any advice who's starting in teaching in their first 3 or 4 years about why either not to go into it in the first place or why to go into it or how to sustain it, what would your thoughts be?
I mean, obviously, being a teacher now and kind of seeing the joy that I do see, I would always recommend for somebody to go into teaching. But that just doesn't discount, like you said, the weeks where you need tissues. And those do happen. I always tend to find that at least about once every half term, I have a bit of a day where I just the job has just got to me and I just feel like it's a bit too much. And I normally go home and have a little cry, have a cup of tea, and I'm all right. But just because, and I think I said to you the other day, sometimes it just feels a little bit like, Instagram, which is not the source of all knowledge, but does have some good analogies. I saw one thing that said that being a teacher day to day in the classroom is a little bit like preparing a meal, but for 30 different people who have 30 slightly varying dietary requirements. And sometimes you're not even really sure what those dietary requirements are. Sometimes you even have to work that out for yourself, normally by making them ill and then discovering that's not how they like to eat. And you have to prepare the food and then you have to serve the food 5 times a day for 5 hours, and you have to also entertain them whilst they're eating the meal. But the meal also has to look nice, otherwise they're not going to want to eat it. And they also get quite confused whilst they eat the meal, so you've got to explain to them how they need to eat the meal. And then what might happen is somebody might come in and then tell you that you're serving the meal wrong. Or you might have somebody that wants to come and join in and eat it as well, but you haven't prepared enough for them. And you can kind of imagine what doing that for 5 hours a day does if just like I said at the beginning, when just everything is kind of constantly here a lot of the time. And so really the hardest thing, I think, and the thing that really puts people off is the capacity, the capacity that it requires and the amount that it can take out of you on the day-to-day. But there is so much joy that can be found. Yeah. And a bit like you said, Kim, the small things really matter. And I think that is something that has kept me in the job, is just like deciding to believe that the small things matter. And again, I think that is something that Jesus did. Jesus knew that the small things mattered. I mean, of course he did. He created them. He is God, and he sees if a child doesn't know their 4 times table, and he sees if somebody wrote a really wonderful story about a dragon. Like, and although these things seemingly don't matter, you can easily think that, you know, they're not going to contribute to society, or you're not going to win a Nobel Peace Prize. But choosing to believe that the small things matter has actually weirdly been the thing that's kept me in it. Right. I think for some people it's the thing that kind of, pushes them out. But I guess, I mean, maybe I'm just quite stubborn. I think a lot of teachers are quite stubborn. But I think if Jesus cares about stuff, then I want to as well. But it is difficult when also people tell you, oh, yeah, you're doing a really good job. You are kind of changing the world. And you think, well, today I cleared up vomit from the carpet. So it really didn't feel very much like...
Some people are very grateful you did.
Change the world. But, you know, thank you for being encouraging.
Did it not give you sand to help?
We do have sand,
Good.
Which is a great teacher tip if anybody wants sand for clearing up vomit.
Clearing up vomit.
But
weirdly, that's kind of been the thing that's kept me in.
Yeah. Stubborn is one word, but I'm sure Kim wouldn't allow you to use a negative word. She'd probably say determined.
Determination, yes.
Resolute.
Resilient.
I think the detail is really important, and the thing, one of the areas of the Bible that kept me going is thinking about in Exodus, when they're making the Ark of the Covenant, the detail. I never really understood all that, if I'm honest, because I'm not like you, Mark. I don't understand I don't understand all the theology. And sometimes I used to kind of skip over some of the detail because I was saying, I don't really need to know about how many duels and this kind of thing happened. But actually, what struck me at one point was actually the difference, though, that they then talk about how people create and the skills of everyone, and how in creating that, and then he made them teachers. And actually, it is in the detail. It is in the tiniest of details and often you don't know that that's the one thing that has helped that child to move on and to kind of break through with them, because you bothered to do the one detail.
Yeah.
And for me, it's always just keeping coming back to the fact that it is a high calling to be a teacher. And you're right. And on the day when you're dealing with sick and vomit, or as we'll be coming up to, glitter on the floor, and the cleaners are cross with you because there's so much glitter and glue all over the floor. Actually, it's remembering that today I made a difference. I did make a difference to one child. I had a conversation with a child that maybe won't have a conversation with anybody when they go home.
That little section of Exodus is making of the ark, isn't it? You're talking about?
Yeah.
It's making the ark, making of something that would carry the presence of God and making it worshipfully. And it says of Bezalel, who's the lead guy, that he was anointed with the Holy Spirit, a rare thing then. And number 2 was Aholiab.
Aholiab.
If that's the right way to pronounce it.
I'm not sure.
No. And it's a curious thing, and indeed they were called on to pass that on to others.
Yeah.
So here we have Bezalel and Aholiab, clearly, thank you, anointed people by the Lord to produce something beautiful for him, carrying his presence into the classroom, into schools, day by day, and teaching others his ways, whether they know it's his ways at this stage or not, and whether in, I won't say how many years' time, you too have stories of children who come back in their 30s with their children.
Yeah, let's hope so.
May it be so.
Kim, I'm going to ask you a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
What would you say to a young teacher, a young professional, somebody who works with children and young people when things really are hard?
Actually, that does happen, and as a head, it happened. Where people were finding things overwhelming and difficult. One of the things I was told in my early time as a teacher was that the leadership and the ethos of the place you work in is really, really important, and that one thing to consider when you're struggling or maybe becoming overwhelmed is, am I in the right place? Not, is teaching right for me?
Yeah.
Actually, because schools are very different places and they operate in different places. You talked about earlier to me about your school and the head teacher and the supportive environment in which you work. And as an inspector, I've seen a myriad of places and different leadership styles and different places, and people flourish in all sorts of ways. But if you are finding that, I would say don't give up on teaching. Think about whether you're in the right place first and whether there is somewhere else that you can flourish.
Yeah.
Very good.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So my question to you is, you obviously are doing really well, and Mark has alluded to the fact that you've become maths leader and kind of other responsibilities. How do your leaders equip you for that extra responsibility that you have, as well as teaching your class?
Yes. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to find time in a teaching day to do anything extra. I think the thing that they do most is they model what is needed. They model good practice. They model how to have good working relationships. They model what good classroom practice looks like. And I know that kind of sounds kind of like a cop-out. It's like they're not really doing much extra, but they are. I think when you can watch and you can learn from really positive, really influential leadership, you can absorb so much without even realizing. And so just the way that they are, the way that they support me, the way that they bring me into decisions that need to be made. I remember the other day I was making a decision about, helping to kind of decide if somebody should be employed or not. And obviously I've never done that before. And it obviously was not my final decision, but I was brought into the conversation. And the questions that they asked me to draw out my thoughts about it, because I've never had to think about that before, was really helpful. And even just experiencing how they lead me and learning good leadership from how I'm being led, I actually think is something really, really significant and is often overlooked, is when you're being led by good leaders is, well, what do they do? How did they have that conversation? How did they approach that difficult topic? And just watching and consciously trying to absorb what they do. And also asking good questions, I think, goes a long way. Remembering that actually I can ask for help and I can go to them and ask how they did something, because everybody also starts somewhere. And I think as being a young teacher, I forget that. I feel like it's me against the system. and it's really not. No. It's really not. We're all kind of figuring it out as we go along, and there is no need to try to be perfect. Yeah.
Well, that's reassuring for me. Thank you both so much for blessing me and us today. This is the Thank God It's Monday podcast, so obviously you get gifts, and because you get gifts and Thank God It's Monday podcast, I'm going to have to do this rather inelegantly for the cameras, and they're going to be annoyed later. I didn't do that very well. That's going to be remorseful. Speaker remorse. So since it's the Thank God It's Monday podcast, guess what book you get? Wow. You get a copy of And because, this was happening before you mentioned chocolates, here are some chocolates for you.
It's not even Friday.
It's
not
even
Friday, it's only Thursday. Thursday. And these little red orbs, these are branded chocolates, red orbs of sweetness to remind us, like the red dots, what a sweet thing it is to follow Jesus in our day-to-day work. And because I knew about the tissues, just in case, I absolutely blew it. Especially, I don't want any other guest to expect 3 gifts. Those are your gifts.
Thank you very much.
That's really kind.
Thank you so much again.
So
how blessed all your pupils and those you lead and teach in variety of ways have been. A good teacher is a gift from above, isn't it? It's a gift from above. And it reminds me today of how grateful I am to the many people who taught me, some of whom I did thank, and some of whom probably I should have thanked, but praise the Lord for all of them. Well, wherever you serve, whoever you serve this week, whatever your work is, may the people you serve know indeed that they are precious and significant to the King of the universe. And may you know it too in all you do for him. Thanks for listening.